Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Maria Hostiu. I am the head of studio experience here at Cognizant Softvision, and you are attending the 7th edition of Programmers Week. This year at Programmers Week, we aim to go beyond, to offer you experiences to remember by pushing the limits of technology and innovation. And I can't think of a better way to do that than through talking about Formula One, the pinnacle of motorsport, combining talent, passion, strategy, technology, and innovation. 2021 is a very special year for all of us here, as Cognizant became the name partner of the Aston Martin Formula One team, thus bringing together technology and innovation for fans all over the world. AI, data, analytics, automation, they are all transforming every aspect of our daily society, and that includes Formula One racing. Technology is making the cars faster, the pit stops more efficient, the drivers safer. The future of Formula One absolutely roars technology. Thus, I am delighted and truly privileged to introduce you to one of your keynote speakers today, none other than Otmar Szafnauer, CEO and team principal of the Aston Martin Cognizant Formula One team. And for those of you who don't know Otmar yet, although I'm pretty sure that everyone in the audience is a fan, or maybe will be after today, he was actually born in Romania, not very far from our company's headquarters in Cluj-Napoca, and he lived there until the age of 7. He then moved to the US and started a journey that enabled him to work with some of the most brilliant minds in the Formula One world and to run global businesses and teams that we could all learn from. So buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. It's lights out and away we go. We're racing at Programmers Week. Otmar, over to you.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you for the introduction. Just a small, now I don't want to say error, but a small correction. I left Romania when I was 8 years old, not 7. That was a long time ago in 1972, and I moved to Detroit, Michigan, which was fortuitous in the fact that Detroit was, and probably still is, one of the leading automotive cities in the world. So it was the world's biggest producer of automobiles, and that, with the fact that I liked racing from a young age, enabled me to get an education that also enabled me to follow my passion for racing. And yeah, it's been a long journey. 1972, I left Romania all those years ago to make it to the pinnacle of motorsport and having the privilege to run the Aston Martin Cognizant Formula One team. I want to also welcome all of you. I know this is Programmers Week, and I also know that we probably have a lot of software developers listening, programmers listening, and that, as well as other technologies, are at the forefront of what a Formula One team does. We've got, for example, much and many software that is bespoke to us. We write a lot of our own code, mainly for 2 reasons. One, sometimes we can't get the code that's specific to the tasks that we have here, but mainly if it's an area of strategic and competitive advantage, then we want to do our own, such that we can do a better job than our competitors and actually have that software and the tools that we develop ourselves help us beat them on track and go faster. So the role of our software developers and our teams here that do program for us and write bespoke software is very critical for a Formula One team and very important. We've now partnered with Cognizant, and you have helped and embedded some engineers within our organization to help in many ways. 1, in writing software, but 2, in also becoming more efficient and streamlining some of our data analytics, as well as streamlining some of our communications just to become more efficient in what we do. And for that, I want to thank everybody. Is there anything you want to ask me, Maria, or anybody?
On that topic, actually, Otmar, I wanted just to remind the audience that if they have any questions or if they have any comments, feel free to use the chat module and Otmar will answer your questions. And actually, I wanted to ask you, Otmar, because you've mentioned the software and you mentioned the importance that software has in Formula One racing these days. As fans, right, as audience, we see all the time when we see Formula One races, either, you know, the cameras on the helmets or the AI, the analytics, who will catch who on how many laps and so on. So there's a large amount of technology at this point, as you were mentioning, involved in Formula One races. Obviously, a few years back, that didn't exist, or many years back, not just a few years back. Now, I want to ask you, in your opinion, what would be the impact of technology on Formula One and on drivers? Does it actually limit the talent or does it boost it in terms of driving?
Well, that's a good question. So because over time, things have changed. And if you look back at, for example, the days of Ayrton Senna, maybe, and that wasn't that long ago, you know, mid to early 90s. If you look at some of the footage of, say, Senna and Prost racing, one of the things and one of the key skills that they had to have was upshifting and downshifting, especially downshifting as you're hard on the brakes, coming into the corner, getting the downshifts just right, such that you have the engine revving at the same rate as the gearbox is revving before you put it in a lower gear. And if you didn't have that, it would disrupt the balance of the car, and it would have a great shift of mass from the back to the rear or vice versa. And when you have that, then you have a contact patch to the ground of the four wheels that is suboptimal. And if you have suboptimal contact patch, that means you can't take the corner as quickly as you normally could, or you can't brake as efficiently as you normally could. All that in the mid-90s was done manually. And if one driver could do it a little bit better than the next driver, he would maximize his contact patch and go quicker. And Senna was one of the best at it. Nowadays, that's all done by software. So it's because of people like yourselves, very clever, you know, all the drivers now do is hard on the brakes and just downshift with a paddle, and the synchronizing of the gearbox along with the engine that was so critical and so important for good lap time is now done by software. So you could argue that, well, you know, now the software and the technology has taken over a little bit and the driver doesn't have to be as skilled. However, having said that, that's the same for everybody, and you still have to have skill in braking late, in turning in at the appropriate time, in maximizing the grip through the corner. It's just the skill of synchronizing engine to gearbox and shifting doesn't happen anymore. So that is one area where the likes of yourselves have helped in Formula One. Yes, we go quicker. Everybody goes quicker because of it. And there's a little bit less skill there. However, the driver still needs huge amount of skill to do everything else.
Great. Thank you so much for your answer, Otmar. And actually building upon what you've mentioned, everybody has to do it kind of the same way. The new FIA regulations, right, next year. With that, will technology play a lesser or a higher role in Formula One racing?
Well, I think the technology in the new regulations will probably be the same. The technology that's used to develop an entire new philosophy of car is where the application happens. You know, so for example, years ago, we all look to do a couple things in Formula One. One, for mechanical design, we all want it to be infinitely stiff, for example, and weigh nothing, right? So you want a component to have zero mass and infinite stiffness. And those two things are incompatible. You can't have anything on a car that has zero mass, and you can't have anything that has zero stiffness. But those are the two parameters in a mechanical design that we look for, whether it's a suspension member, an upright, the chassis, the gearbox casing, even gearbox internals. So in the past, the smart engineers would, look at components, design them to their best of their ability for them to be light and stiff. Nowadays, we use FEA tools, software that's very, very sophisticated to help us. So we start off with a design, and then we apply the FEA software that helps us take weight out such that we don't have an impact on stiffness or performance. And there are many, many, many underlying technologies in the development of a car that help us when the regulations and the rules change to get close to the optimal. It won't be the optimal because we go through this iterative process. When we learn, we put a car out there, somebody may have done a better job in some area, we learn from them, and then we go through the feedback loop and redesign, redevelop, and build again, and we do that over and over and over. But because of the tools that we have, the technologies that we apply to new regulations, we get very much closer now than we would have in the past. Another area, which is aerodynamics, we use a significant amount of computational fluid dynamics, which again is all software to take shapes and develop them such that they become efficient in both giving us downforce as well as reducing drag. And again, downforce is great for better contact patch, so we can go around corners quicker, and reducing drag is great for the straights where we don't want drag, so we can have high speed. Again, that's so we can go faster and we can be competitive on track, and we have a good opportunity to win. But it's not really the technology that drives the car. It's the technology that drives the processes and the systems that we apply such that we get to an optimal solution quicker. And that's where most of the technology lies.
Comes into play. Perfect. Thank you so much, Otmar. Of course, the questions are pouring in, as you can imagine, on chat. So thank you, everybody, for asking your questions. And I'm going to go with one that we just received because we're talking about innovation and the role of technology in Formula One. The question is, what, according to you, was the most disruptive technological innovation that changed the face of racing?
Well, I mean, there's loads of them that I could point to, but in my day, probably I've been racing for 33 years, and I started racing in a car that had steel tube frames and a small aluminum honeycomb crash structure up front. Very, very dangerous. If you crashed at high speed, high likelihood of injury or even death. But now, as we saw Roman Grosjean's crash last year, which was horrific, he walked away, and many, many other high-speed crashes where the drivers walk away. A big reason for that is the fact that we've developed carbon fiber such that we make the monocoque, the chassis, and a lot of the other safety structures within Formula One out of carbon fiber technology. And that didn't exist when I was racing, which was 25 years ago. And now that's everywhere within racing. And it's even started to propagate into high-end sports cars. So, the McLarens and Ferraris and many of the other sports cars, Aston Martin, all carbon fiber chassis in the Valkyrie and the Valhalla. So that technology is now becoming more commonplace, but that's one of the biggest innovations that I saw and very impactful from a safety perspective, as well as from a competitive perspective. You go faster in a carbon fiber tub. The car goes quicker. So that's one technology that I can point to that was, I think the word was disruptive, and it was.
In a very good way, thankfully. So that's really crucial. Okay, now you've mentioned, of course, again, there are a lot of questions. I'm going to try to ask all of them, but I do have one related to what you just mentioned. Formula One is an amazing sport, and in the same time, a quite dangerous one, right? You've quoted Grosjean's accident from last year. When you first started racing, I imagine that in the family and your parents, right, they were they afraid, or did they have any all the support in the world for you? What would you say to a family who has children who want to start Formula One or go-karts?
So I was fortunate that I think my family didn't have a good understanding of the dangers, and I didn't point them out to them either. So I was in my 20s when I started racing, and I myself understood the dangers, but probably not enough to be afraid. So I was never ever afraid of getting in a racing car, even after I crashed, and I had a few crashes. But at the same time, I have 3 children now, and my son doesn't race, and I think that's because as a father, knowing the dangers, I made different decisions for him. But that's not for everybody. There are plenty of dads out there. We have one that owns our team, and his son, who's a very talented racer, has been racing since he was 7 years old, and he's made it into Formula One, and he's one of our 2 drivers. He's one of the most talented young drivers out there, and his dad owns a team, and the son races. So people have different thresholds for, I guess, risk. And I had a high threshold. I raced myself. But like I said, at the same time, my children do other things.
Great. Now, you've mentioned the word risk. You are in a world, you're CEO and team principal, right? So you are in a world where there are multiple types of risks, and the one that we just talked about is one of them. But as I see in a question here, there's also a lot of expectations to manage in a Formula One team. I can only imagine. So considering, financial backing, heritage of the team, how do you manage to pick up, for one matter, the spirits after maybe a not so great weekend or not so great result as per the target? How do you manage to pick up everybody and reset them?
So I think the right way to do that is to recognize that this is a long term, or for some businesses, what's long term for us is probably short and medium term for them. But this is a project where in 3, 4, 5 years we should not have these types of or not have as many weekends where it didn't go to plan, and we should have more of them where we are racing at the pinnacle. And it's a process to get there. So we can't look at race weekend by race weekend by race weekend and go up and down. We have to learn from our mistakes, make sure we don't repeat them, but also understand that for us, this is a 3, 4, 5 year goal and process to get to the sharp end and race with those winning, and we want to win ourselves. So we just have to remind everybody that we are in a process. We're in the building phase of this team. We only have 550 employees today. The big teams are at 900. Some of them even 1,000. So for us to compete there, we've got to put the infrastructure in place. We've got to get like-minded individuals who work with us. We all have to pull in the same direction, and then lo and behold, we will have the results. But in the meantime, when we have a good weekend and a not so good weekend, we have to remember that it's the long term that we're looking at. It's a little bit like investing in the stock market. You should invest for the long term. Don't look at the results every day, because that'll drive you mad.
Pretty much. I was about to say that it's very similar to, the usual company, exactly as we do, with ups and downs, looking at the long term with the targets, only that you do it at, 300 kilometers per hour, probably. Okay, now, so you made it pretty clear you have targets, goals, multi-annual, and so on. But of course, in Formula One, it's unpredictable. We've seen that in the recent weekend, the most recent race. So I have a question here saying, haven't chosen a race strategy, right? The strategy on the pit stops and the tires and so on. How frequently do you change the strategy during the course of one race? And what are the current improvement opportunities in that?
So almost always. We start off with a base strategy for both drivers, and that base strategy will be developed with many inputs. And if those inputs change because they're not under our control, for example, what the other teams around us are doing when they're planning to pit, what their lap times look like, what their tire degradation looks like versus ours, should we be undercutting because there's a gap that we can fall into, or should we stay out later because if we do pit now, we will be stuck behind a slower car and it will ruin our race. All those things are taken into consideration, which you cannot predict before the race starts, because you can't predict who's going to overtake who into the first corner. You can't predict people getting to accidents, falling off. You can't predict how big the pit window is going to be versus other cars. None of that can be predicted, so we have to change. We all go in with a base strategy. If it's one stop versus two stop, generally that we don't change. But stop lap, that's all based on what's happening around us. And more often than not, we can't predict what's going to happen than we can. So we all have to be very adaptable to what's happening around us, such that we can quickly change. All the other teams are doing the same. So we just have to do it a little bit better such that we come out ahead of them.
And when it comes to, taking the hard decisions, I imagine that it's not easy being in your shoes. And sometimes in those close call moments, all eyes are going to be on you. How does it feel to be the person taking the hard decisions? And maybe what, if it's not confidential, of course, what was the hardest decision that you ever had to take during a race?
Usually the hard decisions are to maximize the team points at the expense of driver points. So the drivers, because they're immensely competitive, not just against each other, but against everybody else on the grid. But sometimes it requires us to switch drivers on track to be able to maximize the team points at the expense of that driver's points. And those are always difficult conversations to have, but they're necessary. And the way we do it is we make sure everybody has a good understanding before we go into the race, before we get to that situation, that's what we're going to do. We get agreement from everybody, but that is the rational and the right thing to do, such that when we're in that situation in a race, it becomes less emotional, less disruptive, and everybody's in agreement that that's what we are going to do. But it's still never easy. It's never easy to swap drivers on track for the benefit of the team, but at the expense of a driver.
What would you say are, with reference to what you just mentioned, what would you say are the really must-have characteristics of a team principal?
I would imagine a few things. One, good racing experience. So you've been there, done it, seen it, and probably in the lower formulas before you get to Formula One, so that when you are thrown in that type of situation, you can rely on the experience that you've had. You've been there before. You know what the consequences are of one decision or another, so you can quickly make good decisions. Number one. Number two, I think you have to be able to make sure that a big team, 550, 600, 700, 800 people, all pull in the same direction. And that is the glue that holds us all together, the ethos that we all have, the way we treat each other with respect, the way we work together, such that we can have creative engineering in order to develop a car that goes quicker. And I think the team principal has a big influence on that glue that holds us all together and makes us work pull in the same direction and work as a cohesive unit, even though there's 550 of us, such that we can design, develop the best car to our ability and compete against some of the others that might even be bigger or have more resources than we do. That to me is the role of the team principal. And also making sure that the talented men and women that we have the tools that they need to be able to do their job. And that's it. Those are the three things.
Thank you so much. And I think it's very similar. I would say again, I'm bringing it all back to the comparison with, the software company. I'm going to say Cognizant Softvision here. We also believe that the glue that keeps us together gives us that long-term vision and the targets more achievable.
And that sense of purpose. We all have
absolutely
sense of purpose.
Absolutely. Then we're talking about the characteristics of a team principal, and I see a question here. I'm going to link it with what I was about to ask you. We see a lot of talents today in Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3. So there's a very promising generation of drivers coming, and we see that year over year. So my question to you would be, what would be the characteristics of an amazing Formula 1 driver?
Well, an amazing Formula 1 driver has to have the mental, although it's very physical, and a lot of them spend a lot of time on their physical fitness, because to be in the car for hours with all the G-forces, you definitely need to be physically fit. But I think the best drivers have a big mental capacity to almost slow down what's happening around them at 320 kilometers an hour, such that they can take many, many inputs in, process the information, and then make decisions and put inputs into the car such that they get the car to the limit and keep it there. And that is such a mental thing. And it takes one, I think, innate ability, but two, also learned ability. And those that start racing at a young age, 5, 6, 7 years old, where their brains are a little bit more malleable. And because they have that experience, the interconnections of all their synapses and brain cells are wired such that you can almost slow the speed down and make those fine adjustments and inputs of the car such that you keep the car to its limit, both under braking, accelerating, turn in, mid-corner. And if you can do that, then you can eke out just a little bit more than the next person. And that's what it's about.
So that's quite paradoxical, I would say, right? To be a Formula 1 driver, and you need to slow down at the crucial moments to be able to.
You need in your brain to be able to slow all that stuff down, make fine movements, and keep the car at its limit. If you can do all those things, and you see it. I mean, there are many times where I watch a Formula 1 race, and I see drivers at 300 plus kilometers an hour, millimeters from each other, and going into a turn, and I'm thinking they're going to crash into each other. And they take the turn at, by the time they slow down, turn in, maybe they're at 180 kilometers an hour, but still really, really fast. And they're millimeters from each other. And that's because they're able to slow all that down and just make those small movements that are required to get through the turn without crashing. And it's amazing to me.
Absolutely. I actually remember in one of the recent races hearing Sebastian Vettel saying that he doesn't need to, be told the finishing order, because he actually saw it in one of the big TVs. And I was amazed. How can you drive at that speed and see the actual order, the finishing order on a huge TV? Yeah,
that's because you have so much mental capacity about you. Driving doesn't become second nature, but it's back in your brain somewhere, and then you can assess many other things. And the successful drivers have that capacity.
Absolutely. Well, another question that I see on chat is a curiosity probably, and I'm curious as well. How many people are working live during a race weekend, either at the track, back at the factory? How many?
We have about 100 that travel with us to every race, and then probably 20 to 25 back at the factory. So In the region of 100 to 125 that work every race live.
Wow, that's quite a lot, I would say. That's quite a lot. Although you were mentioning that there are other teams who have a bigger capacity of workers.
Yeah. So when we're live, I would imagine most teams are about the same.
Okay. Another question, and again, I think it's pretty obvious why this question is asked. It's about Aston Martin and Cognizant together, and the question is about the plans of Cognizant and Aston Martin. Is this a long-term? What are the future plans? And of course, how big is the team in Cognizant supporting you?
Yeah, so we have great support from Cognizant. We have many Cognizant employees embedded with us. That's happened recently to help us both streamline some of our processes, some of our communications, some of data analytics, and also our IT infrastructure that we're now developing. So those are the areas that we're getting help from Cognizant. I think the Cognizant employees that are here helping us are enjoying the challenge. And I was speaking to both Rob Walker and Brian Humphreys, and I said, the best way you can help us is for you to understand our business and then input into making us more efficient, more streamlined, and better, as opposed to us trying to understand your business and then asking for help. And they agreed that was the best way to do it. So we have people here that are now looking over our shoulders to understand what we do, how we go, what processes we have, how we go about our daily business, and then recommending, like I say, improvements for basically efficiencies, just so we can get more efficient. And now that we have a cost cap that has come into the frame in Formula One, efficiency will become even more important. So if Cognizant can help us with that, that will be a tremendous help in being able to save some resource in order to apply it to making the car go faster.
Great. Now, I have some questions here that are pretty technical, and I'm going to go for them. Don't get me wrong, I love Formula One, but I'm not that technical. So bear with me if I have any mistakes in the question. So the first one is, are spoiler splitter controlled by auto systems on the car, depending on the turf, like in the aircraft, assuming this would improve performance?
So yes and no. Mainly no. So we are not allowed to have automated aerodynamic devices or even movable aerodynamic devices. It's by regulation that we cannot. However, having said that, the one movable aerodynamic device that we are allowed is the DRS, which is the upper flap of the rear wing can open up. And that is only allowed to be open when you're within a second of the driver ahead of you at the DRS detection zone. And if you catch that driver in front of you, you're allowed to open up the flap to reduce the drag. DRS stands for drag reduction system. And it isn't a big drag reduction, but it's enough to be able to, at most places, assist you in overtaking the driver in front of you. Okay. Because in Formula One, we have this big problem that even if you're in a faster car, you can catch the driver in front of you, but then you can't overtake because the delta in speed or lap time isn't big enough to overtake. And that's not really fair. So you should be able to, if you can catch the car in front, you should be able to have a small advantage to be able to also overtake. And that was studied over time. Because if the advantage is too big, then it's artificial. And if the advantage is too small, then it's not right either. So we had to get it just right. There are some circuits where even with DRS, you can't overtake. So the DRS advantage isn't big enough. But I think for most of them, we got it just about right. So the only movable aerodynamic device we have is a drag reduction system. The rest of it, we can't do by regulation.
Okay, and judging by, because we're talking about overtakes, judging by the fact that Sebastian is actually the record holder for this season, I think you're doing a pretty good job, right? He's still the first one.
Not bad, not bad.
Not bad. Good. Thank you so much for that. Now, because we're talking about you being fortunate to live in a city such as Detroit, and we all know that that's the ground zero of motorsport. And generally, when we talk cars, we talk synonymously with Detroit. How do you think someone, what do you think was your chance to really make it in the motorsport world? We're talking, and I know that we have a lot of viewers in Romania here. You started up, so to say, you were born in Romania. What was that big chance for you to make it?
Yeah, so I was born in Semlac, Romania, not far from Arad. My mother is of Romanian heritage, and my father, because of probably my name gives it away, was of German heritage, but it was in an area of Romania where there were Germans as well as Hungarians and Romanians all living together. And we moved to Detroit in '72, which was very, very helpful. And also studying engineering at university was also very, very helpful. But I think the biggest thing was my passion for motor racing. I enjoyed it from a young age. I don't know why. But I did. My good friend's father, when I lived in the Detroit area, he was a drag racer, and often he would bring the racing cars home. And when he did, we would sit there and look at them and watch the mechanics and the engineers work on them all day long. But I think probably the biggest turning point was when I was working as an engineer at Ford Motor Company, as well as running my own race team. I met Adrian Reynard, who at the time was building Indy cars, and he was one of the founding members of British-American Racing, the Formula One team. And he asked me to move to England from Detroit and help him with the Formula One team. And the reason I think he asked is he knew I was racing and had my own race team, but at the same time had some corporate skills, and he wanted to combine his senior management team at British American Racing to have some corporate skills as well as some racing skills. He thought that was better. And he asked me to leave Ford and join British American Racing. I think that was the turning point, really. And that happened in 1998.
So what's cooler, being a manager or being a racer?
I think cooler a racer, but it's risky.
It's riskier being a racer than a manager.
It's riskier being a racer than a manager. But I think it's cooler, so with risk comes reward, I guess.
Absolutely. Now, another question, because we were talking before about next year. At this point in time, kind of all teams are thinking about next year and what's coming and what they're developing. That's a cool baseball cap, by the way.
I was just thinking of coolness. I would wear this for a little bit.
That's an extra degree of coolness, so you're all set.
You probably recognize it.
Absolutely. It's famous all around the world. So coming back to the question, what do you think is the key to strike the balance between encouraging teams to innovate, right, and establish regulations to maintain that level playing field?
Well, I think to establish a level playing field, the best thing that we've done was to introduce a cost cap. Because in the past, although the regulations were the same for everybody, not everybody could innovate at the same rate because not everybody had the same resource. Now, you could say, well, shame on you for not having the same resource, but you had independent teams in the past competing with the likes of major car manufacturers, Mercedes, Fiat and Ferrari, Honda, Toyota, BMW. And then you had independent teams like Jordan Grand Prix or Force India. And it was very, very difficult for those independent teams, especially as time went on, to compete with those that had bigger resource. So I think the cost cap has gone a long way to level the playing field. Not so much the regulations, because the regulations are the same for everybody. Everybody reads them, interprets them the best they can, and tries to make a Formula One car that goes quickest around the circuit. But now the financial regulations actually caps the money that could be spent which means in the future, the smarter teams, or those who work the best together or come up with the best ideas, have a better chance of winning than the richest teams. Like in the past, it was the richest ones. Having the resource doesn't guarantee you wins, but the corollary holds true. If you don't have the resource, you're guaranteed not to win.
Great, thank you so much. So last week, Monza, right? What's your favorite track from the calendar?
People ask me that all the time, and I don't have one favorite because.
Okay, top three then.
I like the old school ones. Monza's in there. Spa, Suzuka. I like Silverstone, and they're all the old school tracks for whatever reason. And again, back then when those tracks were designed, they were designed without the technology that we have today. So now we have simulation tools, and before we do a track layout, we simulate the cars on certain different layouts to understand where overtaking could happen, where the DRS zones should be, all sorts of simulation tools that we have now, which are all software based. And we apply those to get to a circuit that will be entertaining for the fans and fun to drive for the drivers. It seems like with all the technology and innovation and knowledge that we have today, for whatever reason, those that were designed in the 60s are still my favorite. And they didn't have those tools. So they must have had some smart people looking at it and saying, this is what this track should be like. Because Spa and Suzuka are just amazing. Monza too, and that's been changed. Silverstone as well. But yeah, it's the old ones that I like the best.
Then it's truly a pity that we couldn't see a race at Spa, unfortunately, this year. Maybe next year is going to be better and we can all enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, that the thing that happened at Spa this year, there's always a probability of rain there. However, we've been racing there for a long time, and this is the first time that it's happened. So if I had a crystal ball, I would guess it will not happen next year.
So it will be that year in the history of racing that will go down like that, and that will be a good story to tell. You were telling us earlier about the learning curve and the fact that it's always like a domino effect and learning each and every race. I have a question here that asks, how big has the impact of Seb has been in the development of the team, and what did you learn together or from him?
Many little things from Seb, and he has had a big impact. There are things we do differently because of him now. We analyze a lap a little bit differently because of him than we used to in the past. And again, all things better. Little ergonomic things, he's changed our steering wheel to be more functional, easier for both drivers to use. And when you're in the heat of the moment, and like I said, when you're trying to slow everything down and you've got switches to turn, it's really nice to have that be second nature so you can go quicker, as an example. But yeah, our analytics have improved because of him. And the other thing with Seb is, he leaves no stone unturned. If there's a little bit of performance to be had anywhere, he'll find it and he'll tell us. And he's pointed out things in the powertrain where the drivability wasn't quite to his liking, and he's come from other teams where they had better drivability, and drivability is lap time. And so then when he told our powertrain engineers of the drivability that is possible with these engines because he's experienced it, we then went and searched and hunted and developed and got to a similar level of drivability, again, lap time. And all these things, the little things that he's brought to us has improved the team, the car, and everyone around him.
And we're actually hoping to see him for many years with Aston Martin Cognizant. Me trying to get an answer here from you.
Me too. We like Seb. He likes us. Watch this space.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, now let's get to the cusp of it, because we only have 10 minutes. And the important question that lies here is, what car do you drive day by day?
So my daily driver is an Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, which is great fun to drive. I recently drove it to Spa, and then from Spa to visit one of our main sponsors in Salzburg, and then from Salzburg up to Zandvoort. So I put thousands of miles on it, and it really came. It came to the forefront and to my pleasure on the Autobahn. I mean, it was just amazing. It came in its own. It was amazing on the Autobahn. It's a Grand Tour. It was comfortable. I could drive it for long distances without fatigue. But because it has 715 horsepower on the Autobahn, it was wonderful. It just ate up the kilometers, and it was faster than those pesky BMWs.
So we would definitely know if, as per your driving style, we would definitely know that we're, I don't know, driving next to Otmar, or we couldn't even notice on the motorway.
I don't know if you could or couldn't. Maybe you could. Maybe you could. The car would give it away.
The car would definitely give it away. There are many questions incoming, as I was telling you. One is the opinion on the latest clash that happened at Monza. I don't know if you want to have an opinion or want to give an opinion on that.
Well,
one.
I mean, the way I viewed that is I don't think there's enough room for two cars to go through there. And Lewis was ahead. I think the stewards probably made the right decision in punishing the correct offender.
Thank you for that. Another question is, what are your objectives for the let's say 4 years from now on up until 26, particularly within your regulations?
Yeah, so 4 years from now, we want to be challenging for World Championship and winning being on the podium regularly with wins. And that's what we need to do. Our new factory will be finished in 2 years' time. Our new wind tunnel will be finished in 2 years' time. In those 2 years, we will be hiring like-minded individuals that want to win a World Championship. And 4 years from now, we should be vying for a World Championship.
Great. I think that's actually an amazing note to close this discussion on. Just us thinking of that Aston Martin Cognizant Formula One Championship that will come one day. So I really want to thank you, Otmar, for taking time from your pretty busy schedule, I assume, to join us at Programmers Week. Best of luck with the next of races. We'll be watching you in Sochi and cheering, of course, for the team. And if you have any final message for our audience, please go ahead.
I just want to say, Maria, mulțumesc frumos și la revedere.
Mulțumim și noi. Thank you so much. And this will definitely be something that we could do again sometime. Thank you.